For more on the campaign, we can speak to Paul Smith, the head of the French and Francophone Studies Department at the University of Nottingham. Paul, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we just saw that report on the surge in people who are voting by proxy. Do you think that we are headed for record turnout, and how might that impact the results?
Well, it's two things. I mean, we talked about how people are going on holiday, so they'll want to have a proxy vote. But yes, it certainly seems to indicate that 6 times more people applying for a proxy vote is an extraordinary statistic. So, and it may well be, I mean, one imagines that the high rate of proxy votes is because people feel this is very important, and it might play against the national rally. Very difficult to know exactly who these people are going to be voting for, of course, through their proxy votes. But my mother-in-law has sorted out her proxy vote because she won't be able to vote next Sunday. So we've kind of got skin in the game, as it were. So it's. I think that it would probably mean that it's kind of an opposition vote to the national rally.
I'm also voting for someone else by proxy, so skin in the game as well. Now, after last week that was dominated by alliances, this week saw various political factions unveiling their programs. What stood out to you, perhaps from the national rally in particular? There were quite a few surprises there.
Yes, I think above all, there's been a kind of rowing back from the more radical, the more standout aspects of their policies. Commitments to pensions reform have kind of gone back from that. There was the big meeting during the week on Wednesday or Thursday, what they call the Grand Oral, meeting with the bosses, the employers' associations, to talk about their plans. All of the parties to talk about their plans for the French economy, and that certainly has kind of led to. In some ways, a kind of watering down of particularly national rally policies, not so much the left, the LFI, the new Popular Front have made a very clear program and said this is what we want to do, and they actually use, very interesting that they use the word patriot, that patriotic employers should think about adhering to their program. So a lot of jockeying for position over the economy this week. I'm not sure that that's going to pay off for the parties very much. I'm not sure that this is fully about the economy, but it's been interesting to see how they've all been moving around that particular issue, and of course the risk of instability after the election.
And can you maybe just be a little bit more specific about kind of what particular changes the national rally made that were notable?
Sure, their commitment to reversing the pension reform, for example, but also some of their other policies in terms of unemployment insurance, and because there's been a great deal of uncertainty about things like interest rates and mortgage offers and so forth. These are very these are micro issues, but they're having an impact on individual people. So people who are on the cusp of buying houses are beginning to get a bit nervous because banks are looking a bit jittery as well. So it's kind of beholden upon the Rassemblement National to do that, to kind of say, whoa, we're not going to start tearing up the whole fabric. But at the same time, I think they're playing a game of preparing their own electors for frustration as well. I think that's part of the game that they're playing.
The National Rally leader Jordan Bardella also said this week that he'd only accept the post of prime minister if his party won an absolute majority. What do you make of that? Do you think maybe he doesn't really want the job?
No, he wants the job, but this is his master's voice. There was a very interesting interview in Le Monde with Marine Le Pen, and she basically said exactly the same thing, that the National Rally would only want the prime ministership if they've got an absolute majority, because otherwise, and she explains it this way, that there would almost immediately be a vote of no confidence. The government would be unable to rule. There wouldn't be any legislative program, and then we'd be, from her perspective, they'd be back to square one. I think also that there's kind of again, this is part of the process that I call sort of preparing their electors for frustration. This is part of the strategy of the far right, to kind of look at how institutions look. We're the biggest party, and yet the existing institutions, the system, prevents us from governing properly. So that's kind of it's a bit like Liz Truss in this country saying that her economic policies failed because of the left-wing financial establishment, whatever that is. And that's part of the policy. The strategy is to prepare their supporters for frustration.
And just briefly, Paul, Emmanuel Macron and his allies have continued to make this argument that they're the only alternative to the two extremes, basically equating the far right and the left. Do you think that strategy is still effective for them?
It doesn't seem to be working terribly well, although there is some kind of, there has been a little bit of a surge in support for Macron. I saw one opinion poll that suggested that the presidential parties between them are now back up to about 22%. I mean, they're still way behind the New Popular Front and way behind the National Rally, but there has been something of a recovery. But it doesn't seem to be a terribly effective strategy. Although, having said that, today Edouard Philippe, the former prime minister, who of course has distanced himself from Macron this week or over the last couple of days, has also talked about the importance of presenting the centre bloc, as it were, as being the bloc for stability and the bloc for taking France forward in a measured and an intelligent way. But at the moment, it's still leaving that centre bloc quite a long way behind the far left and the far right, or the left bloc and the far right.
All right, Paul, thank you so much again. Always good to have your thoughts. We're going to have to leave it there. That's Paul Smith, the head of the French and Francophone Studies Department at the University of Nottingham.